Good afternoon from New Richmond High School. My name is Sarah Glenn and I'm here with my co-moderator, Cole Bird, for the presidential debate of New Richmond High School. Today, our two presidential candidates, President Barack Obama and Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, will respond to questions and topics that our team has generated for the debate. Our goal today is to give the conversation direction and ensure the questions get answered properly. These questions have been revealed to each candidate, but there will be an opportunity for them to reply to questions that they have not yet seen. We hope to address as many questions as possible, expecting that each man will respond concisely and appropriately. Each candidate will be given up to 2 minutes to respond to a common question with a 2-minute follow-up. The audience here has agreed to be attentive and respectful. They will not cheer, boo, or react impolitely. We deter from that agreement at just this moment as we welcome President Barack Obama and Governor Mitt Romney. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining us today. We have much to discuss, so let's get started. Mr. President, as you know, you won the coin toss, so the first question will go to you. Cole Bird will lead us on economic issues.
Mr. President, how can the free market be used to create jobs? And what are your plans for lowering unemployment rates?
I would like to start off by thanking New Richmond High School for hosting this debate, and thank Sarah Glenn and Cole Bird for moderating. Now, the free market economy of the United States is one of the strongest and most productive systems in the world. We need policies that will continue to help strengthen this system. I began this process by saving the auto industry, which saved thousands of American jobs. It was a reminder to the American people that if we put our minds to it, anything is possible. Now auto sales are the highest they've been in more than 4 years. Keep in mind that if it were up to Mitt Romney, this industry would have gone bankrupt, leaving thousands more Americans without work. Now, in order to continue lowering the unemployment rate, we need to start with small businesses within the country. That's why I passed the Small Business Jobs Act in 2010, providing $12 billion in loan support to small businesses. That's why I passed the Worker, Homeowner, and Business Assistance Act, which provided $109 billion in tax cuts for these businesses. And over the past 4 years, I've cut taxes for small businesses 18 times. Don't let anyone tell you any different. No one's fought harder for small businesses in this country than my administration has.
And Mr. Mitt Romney?
A free market is when trade happens freely and there is little or no government control in the form of regulation, taxes, tariffs, things like that. The current administration has levied taxes and regulated trade extensively, and that can be done without the approval of Congress or the taxpayers. Removing many of those roadblocks will open trade in both the U.S. and in outside areas as well. And we want to especially focus on the Latin American region. And to lower unemployment rates, we're going to institute our 5-point plan. Number 1 is achieve energy independence from our country, from other countries. And we have the resources and the technology to become independent from foreign energy. Millions of jobs will be created from this, not just in the oil industry, but also in manufacturing. Second is develop and implement a trade plan. We want to level the playing field for Americans so we can limit the current stack deck for countries like China who are overtaking their role in the big economy. And number 3, we want to provide Americans with better skills to succeed after college by better education and in better institutions so that they'll have more opportunities to get a job when they are out of their education. And then number 4, cut the deficit. That is one of our biggest issues right now, and we want to reduce the size of government and reduce the national debt so America is a place where business will want to operate. And number 5 is we want to champion small businesses, which is the backbone of our economy and our capitalist system. By pursuing comprehensive tax reform that lower tax rates for all Americans, and also cutting back on red tape that drives up costs and discourages hiring. And when it comes to the auto industry, President Obama says that I would want them to go bankrupt. Well, in our system that our government has instituted, when companies go into bankruptcy, they get government aid to help reestablish their company. And what their policy did was they took $50 million of our tax money, of our own tax money, from the people in New Richmond, from the states. He used that tax money and funded it and flooded it into these large manufacturers. And what I would do by going into bankruptcy, they would have gotten money from the government as well to help build their company back up, but it would have cost less for the normal everyday citizen.
Mr. President, do you have any comments on the federal government and states reducing the budget deficits?
I would like to begin with saying that Mitt Romney's 5-point plan really isn't a plan. We have a bunch of vague statements here which don't really mean anything. First of all, said that they would like to increase trade and that we should be focusing more on Latin America. My administration has just created a new trade policy with Panama, one of the strongest economies in Latin America. And over Romney's record, we can see that he's been soft on China, one of those who he says we should strengthen our trade with. He also puts an emphasis on education. However, in the Romney-Ryan budget plan, it cuts funding for public schooling. The Romney-Ryan plan has also been shown by many independent reports as adding to the deficit and not cutting it. He says he wants to lower taxes, but again, many independent studies have shown that these tax breaks will be weighted towards the wealthiest Americans. And with the auto industry saying that it should have gone into bankruptcy, and that process, again, thousands of Americans would have lost their jobs. Yes, the industry would have received government funding, but it would have come from taxpayers just the same. This way, we saved American jobs by doing the exact same process.
Mitt Romney, do you have anything to say about
When it comes to the auto industry, we'll begin there. When they go into bankruptcy, jobs are not lost, but when we get these $50 million, the higher elite, the top branches of these big businesses, they are going to support that because they are going to maintain their jobs. And even when they go into bankruptcy, this money is going to be funded to help promote these ideals, to make profit, and to further their business. And with education, I know people have criticized my education values in the form of Massachusetts when I was governor there, and they say it's only 48th in the country when it comes to standards. But what we forget is that when our administration came in, it was 50th. They've ranked #1 in science and math for 2 years, and that's the first time that has ever happened among states in the past so many years. And I think that just saying education is lower on our priorities is not a correct statement in that way, because we understand the importance of getting people out there and have better education and new reform policies that are going to help them understand how to better be prepared for the workforce today.
Mr. President, what strategies will you ensure that American workers are prepared to compete in the global economy?
Really, the only way that Americans can compete in the global economy is to ensure that our education is up to par. And to do this, we'd have to make sure that everyone has a fair shot at getting educated. We'd start with K-12 education. With my Rise to the Top program that we've put in place, it rewards those teachers who created improvement within their states and has spurred 46 states to raise their educational standards without any kind of federal mandate. Along with this, we need to continue providing affordable college for American students. In my first term, I've expanded the Pell Grant system, giving those students seeking higher education who can't afford it their shot, a system which the Romney-Ryan plan would slash almost in half. I've also capped federal student loan repayments at 10%, keeping those students who wish to seek a higher education from drowning in debt the rest of their lives. And I've invested in community college and vocational schools that would get the students who need to be in the workplace there as soon as they can. Without these kinds of educational programs, we can never expect our workforce to be able to compete with the global economy. And the fact is that Romney-Ryan has been very lenient on their education policies, and that with these policies, we would never be able to compete. In fact, during Mitt Romney's governorship in Massachusetts, the rate that students would have to pay back for their college was the highest in the nation. This resulted in the highest per capita income debt of anyone in the country with his state during his administration. Also, his schools began to fall behind. He would like to tout that they went up 2 places but 48 out of 50 states still isn't really a good record now.
Mitt Romney would say that.
In coming up 2 spots and overtaking when it comes to education, coming from 50 to 48, that is a pretty large deal when you consider the amount of education that every state is trying to institute within their own educational systems, and surpassing 2 other institutions just shows that our kids are getting the education they need and that they are going to further improve. And back to how American workers can prepare to compete in the global economy, the government has poured millions of dollars of failed training and retraining efforts for the American workers. These retraining efforts must be founded upon a partnership that brings together the states and private sectors. So states are the ones who should be encouraged to have programs like personal reemployment accounts and help facilitate direct employment of individuals. If we bring these policies back to the state level so that we can have more say, it's going to represent the people's needs a lot more efficiently than if the federal government, with all these other issues with the economy, foreign relations, it's going to be more zoned in to their needs.
All right. For Governor Mitt Romney, do you believe that America is too dependent on foreign resources and economies? And what will you do to decrease the reliance and increase American production and dependency?
Yes, I do believe that America is too dependent on foreign oil right now. And again, referring to my 5-point plan, leaving the playing field in regards to trade and upgrading the skills and education for American workers and championing small businesses in America is going to all lead to less of a dependence on foreign products. I want to open up production across the country, remove barriers to developing our coal, oil, and natural gas resources, and welcome new renewable energy sources. And I think that especially with resources, a lot of has to do with energy. And people forget that coal and oil, if we find clean ways to burn them, they're still an extremely effective way of producing our own energy. And that's why we want to put money into technology to find new, cleaner ways to do this, but we cannot forget that revenue. And imagine how many jobs that's going to take out if we move away from the coal and oil industry so much that it becomes put on the back burner.
All right, Mr.
Well, I would like to say that our country has become increasingly dependent on countries like China. That's why it's absolutely necessary that we increase our own workforce and production. We can do this through the combination of increasing the manufacturing in our country, as well as increasing the amount of research and development level jobs. Now in 2010, I signed the National Export Initiative, which helped double the amount of export from the United States within the next 5 years. Later that year, I enacted the Manufacturing Enhancement Act, which made the resources needed by American manufacturers to produce their goods much more affordable. In 2011, I signed trade agreements with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama, all allowing the American industries to increase their trade. We have to eliminate tax breaks given to those companies who ship jobs overseas. These tax breaks, Governor Romney can tell you a lot more about, since he's personally taken advantage of them as he shipped countless jobs to foreign countries during his time as a business leader. We also have to be tough on China when they try to cheat this American system. They flooded our system with artificially cheap products. For example, here in Ohio, China is pouring artificially cheap steel into our economy, leaving the Ohio steel companies without a means of competing. We fought back, we pressured China, and we put in play tariffs that were needed to make things fair for the American industries, and actually criticized by the Romney administration, saying that it was too harsh and that it would be bad for Americans. My only question is, how is something that's good for American small business bad for America?
Governor Romney, what will your administration do regarding tax reductions?
When it comes to tax reduction, our current tax system is an accumulation of decades of patchwork decisions that have no systematic thought with their implications for job creation or economic growth. To repair the nation's tax code, marginal rates must be brought down to stimulate this entrepreneurship, job creation, investment, while still raising the revenue needed to fund the smaller, simpler government. Principles of fairness have to be preserved in federal tax and spending policies, and there will be changes in both individual and corporate tax codes to accomplish this. By reducing the overall rate, of taxes on small businesses and such, they have to pay less, so they're going to fund more of that money into their employment, into their employees, into the profit they make, so that our country, they can take it back into the capitalist system and let free enterprise work the way it was made to work. Policies regarding taxes on how he's had 2 years, his first 2 years in office, he had a supermajority in the Congress, which means he had full reign to implement any of these policies. And all they've done is raise these taxes on small businesses. And as we can see, even in the small town of New Richmond, they're struggling. They don't have enough money to barely even go on. They have to let go of employees. And I feel like by bringing all this back to the state level, we can fix these problems more efficiently.
Mr. President.
Well, with all due respect, I have to say that that's not true. On the contrary, the Obama administration has lowered taxes for small businesses 18 times. 95% of Americans have received a tax break. Most middle-class families received up to $3,000 of tax breaks from the past administration. Now, I'd like to say that my tax plan for the country would be very simple. I wouldn't raise taxes for anyone making less than $1 million a year. I would close the tax loopholes that millionaires can take unfair advantage of, leaving some of them, like Governor Romney, paying a tax rate of 14%, when the average working family has to pay much more than that, closer to around 20%. At this point, Americans may be asking, how can we trust this? After all, I've been painted as a character who can only raise taxes for everyone, but the facts don't match these claims. Like I've said, within the past 4 years, I've repeatedly lowered taxes for the middle class. The average working class family pays about $3,000 less in taxes than before I got into office. Now, Governor Romney has a very different plan for the American tax system. He claims in lowering taxes, but it will be focused on those making the most, leaving the American middle class to foot the bill. In fact, independent research has shown that the average working class family will have to pay as much as $2,000 more a year in order to pay for this new tax policy. As we can see, the system of trickle-down tax policy is Romney's claim to empowering the economy. But if that's how things actually worked, shouldn't the economy have surged after the Bush tax cuts were put in place for the wealthiest Americans? Instead, they hoarded the money, and we got economic collapse. And that's nowhere that America should be going back to.
All right, Mr. President.
We're going to move on to foreign policy and national security. And the first question goes to you, Mr. President. Congress requires every president to submit a national security strategy for the U.S. What changes would you make to the current one?
Well, I'd like to begin by pointing out the changes I have made to the national security strategy. Two of these most important changes were ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think Americans can agree that it's time we start holding the government of these countries responsible and get our own troops out of harm's way when it isn't necessary. Along with this, we will continue to pressure al-Qaeda, which has already been crippled by our policies. We've worked in reducing the amount of nuclear weapons within the world, including keeping Iran and North Korea from being able to produce any kind of nuclear weapon. Overall, I would have to say that the changes we've made in national security have been fairly successful. But if you don't believe me, you can go ask Muammar Gaddafi what he thinks. If you don't believe him, go ask the crippled al-Qaeda. If you don't believe them, best yet, go ask Osama bin Laden what he thinks about our national security system. On the other side, we have a frightening contrast to these plans, which is a lack of a plan. Governor Romney has gone back and forth on his defense strategy time and time again, and would like to accuse me of insufficiently supporting our allies, that he falls flat and ignores them when they don't completely agree with him, like negotiations on Iran, controlled arms with Russia, and on missile defense. The list goes on and on. It seems that the reason Romney is attacking me on this policy is that he has none. In fact, the Senate-owned Foreign Relations Committee released a document claiming that Governor Romney has produced fewer specific policies on how he would lead on national security issues than any other presidential candidate in the committee's memory. He lacks the judgment and vision necessary to be called commander-in-chief.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mitt Romney.
On May 26, 2010, Obama gave his latest national security strategy, which advocated increased engagement with Russia, China, and India. And the strategy also identified nuclear non-proliferation and climate change as priorities. while noting that the United States' security depended on reviving its economy, and I would agree with that statement. The drafters of this new strategy also made a conscious decision to remove terms such as Islamic radicalism and instead speaking of terrorism in general terms. And I would agree that supporting non-nuclear proliferation and increased agreement with countries like China and Russia and India, but I think we should focus on our greatest allies in the Middle East, such as Israel, England, France, Germany. And I would agree, like I said, that reviving the economy is of uttermost importance. And we will continue to support any of the areas in the world that want to embrace democracy. And as the United States, we are willing to help them. That's why we went to Afghanistan. That's why we're still there, trying to help them. I think we can't just leave them there to fend for themselves with complete absence of the United States, because they're just waiting. They're just going to sit on their borders and wait for us to leave. And when it comes to nuclear weapons, the current administration has said that Iran and such are not trying to produce nuclear weapons, and I think that that's kind of a statement that is not true. And because they've told us that our funding, half of our funding goes to these organizations. So I think we need to make sure that our national security is not going to be damaged by our funding.
Mr. President, how will you keep foreign nations from acquiring nuclear weapons? Is it America's role to be the world's policeman?
I would like to begin with saying that I will not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons, period. Because of the leadership and the concrete steps I've taken, Iran is under more pressure today over its nuclear program than any other time in history. The sanctions I and my administration have put in place have helped the international community put in place are the toughest in history, and they're currently crippling Iran's economy. In fact, Iran's currency has fallen to about 80% since 2011 as a result of these sanctions. Up to this point, Governor Romney has failed to say what he would do differently to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, simply stating that I'm not doing enough. His vague stance on this crucial issue is unacceptable. I believe the American people deserve more. They deserve to know what the leader will do in order to prevent nuclear warfare from attacking the United States. If re-elected, I vow to keep fighting for the sanctions like the ones we've already put in place that will ensure greater peace and tranquility in this country. I also agree that the police kind of force should not be the first means of action in conflict. Resolution and diplomacy should always be used before the United States gets involved in any kind of violent conflicts.
Governor McMonigle.
Strict sanctions have been proven to work in keeping countries from continuing their nuclear weapon programs. However, under this administration, these policies have not been led by the United States. We've allowed the UN to push these policies through. And as it's America's responsibility to promote democracy all over the world, people listen when you're operating in the hand of strength and not of weakness. And we have to be able to stabilize our own economy and grow our businesses so that America is the strongest nation in the world, because our strength helps stabilize the world in itself. And as you said, force, it shouldn't be our first option. I do agree. There are diplomatic measures have been made. However, you have to be willing to use military force if need be. And I feel like when it comes to our allies, I strongly believe that if they are someone's going to stand up against them, we need to be willing to back them militarily, because that is the promise we've given them as their allies.
And Mr. President, we see that our governor has a very defensive stance on military control, but under what conditions would you send American troops into harm's way when America's security is not at risk?
Well, like I said, American troops should only be used when resolution and diplomacy have failed us, first off. After that, the United States will protect its allies like it should. Along with this, there should be some kind of international involvement when we see innocent citizens having their rights oppressed to the point of torture or even death. However, we can see that jumping straight into a conflict isn't the best solution. Look at the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jumping right in has only led to confusion, blue on green casualties, and huge amounts of fraud. Now, I believe that as a country, the United States has an active role within the UN to act as the world's police. However, the United States does not always need to be the forerunner on this. The UN is a council which in itself is meant to promote democracy. There is no need for the United States to constantly be shoving other countries out of its way when they all have the same goal.
It's a very simple answer when it comes to if our security is not at risk. I will stand by our close allies if they're threatened militarily. And we want to do it first diplomatically, second socially, and then, if need be, militarily. And when it comes to jumping in Iran, we didn't just jump in. 9/11 happened. There was a direct attack on U.S. soil. We didn't just go over to Iran and say, we're going to implement new policies, try to get you new government. Something happened. And while we're there, our troops have been trying to put in new policies that will help them also help not only their economy grow, we're trying to help them understand the difference between, like, with genders and education, the importance of all of these things, and how that will grow their economy. And when it comes to the UN, when they're pushing through these policies and they're not working, things like Syria, all the people being killed, Muslim brotherhoods are taking over countries, their policies that they're putting in are not, the regimes coming in and taking over these governments are not promoting freedom like we have asked them to do or we would promote.
All right, gentlemen, that brings us to our conclusion.
I'd like to take this last question and move it towards your to your closing statement. I'd like it to tie together. If our founding fathers were here to see your platform right now, what would they think? Mitt Romney?
I believe that if they looked at my platform, it's under the last administration, the Constitution has been stepped on and it's been gone around, loopholes have been found, and I feel like our forefathers would not appreciate that. They put this in place so that America could remain a stabilized country where people could have their personal liberties, they could have their freedoms, they could have the right to small businesses and a right to prosperity. And I believe that with these new policies, that by 5-point policies, they all agree with the Constitution, and they're going to benefit us to the fullest and provide a better America.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. President.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are things that the Founding Fathers wanted to ensure every single American. However, under the Romney administration, these would be changed to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, as long as you were male, as long as you were white, and as long as you were of the upper class and straight. Now, the Romney administration plans on changing the tax system, benefiting those making the most in the country. Where does that leave everyone else? The whole point of democracy is so that no one gets left behind and everyone's voice is heard. That's what I plan to do. That's what I have done. I'm going to continue making things so that those who want to improve their lives can, and they aren't stuck anywhere, unlike the Romney administration. I'm going to continue my efforts in education. I'm going to continue my national security, which has protected us so well. I am going to continue my tax plan, which allows those Americans who find themselves in the lower percentages able to find themselves somewhere new with hard work. I believe that the Founding Fathers, understanding of the times and of the current situation we were left in, would be relatively proud of the steps we've made ensuring democracy for all Americans.
Thank you both. And I think that is closing for us.
Thursday, we will continue this debate on social and moral issues in the environment.